The survivors of mass shootings in Colorado and across the country will bear the weight of what happened for years.
They're still living the nightmare of it every day.
They talk about it freely because they want the rest of us to know. On this day dedicated to remembering Americans killed in war, a family renews its call for closure.
To have your children at war and then to lose one and then to, where is he?
Together, we are supporting young people in Colorado who have lost a parent who is in the military or working as a first responder. We're helping those kids pursue their passions with the backing of our whole community. And the best pro sports team Colorado isn't talking about is 2 wins from a championship. All that is next. After a mass shooting like the one in Uvalde, Texas, there are promises to remember the lives lost. Well, how about the lives that are left? The surviving family members, friends, neighbors, the lives forever changed. Here's Noel Brennan.
I'm glad I'm here. I think it's important to remember and to listen to these kids' stories.
No connection to a name is needed. The impact of Columbine ripples to a mom.
It's hard.
Like Sarah Woods.
So when I read these names, I imagine, what if this is one of my children's names on here?
13 names are memorialized here, and trauma lingers for the living.
You just cannot imagine the extent of the emotional damage and the ripples that go out and out and out.
Holly Dexter advocates for survivors of gun violence. Her brother was shot when he was 7.
He survived, but he has lived with a bullet in his brain and has a lot of complications from it, not to mention extreme PTSD that just doesn't get fixed.
She worries for her brother and every shooting survivor.
It's really sad to me how forgotten the survivors have been. They're still living the nightmare of it every day, and there's so little support for them.
Support the community of Uvalde, Texas will need.
Every child in that school is going to have PTSD for the rest of their lives. Their childhood was taken from them in that moment.
Holly thinks about the kids, the parents, the police, the EMTs who responded.
The trauma that leaves on everybody involved. There are a lot of victim services that are available in the immediate aftermath of a crime or a shooting, but there's nothing that goes on a long-term basis the way it does, like for veterans of war.
The impact of lives stolen ripples on and on.
Their lives don't move on. They still have to live with it forever.
Holly Dexter wants us all to think more about the people who are left behind after shootings. She says that journalists can do better too by continuing to tell stories about survivors after the initial headlines become history. Kyle, understandably, there's so much focus and coverage in the immediate aftermath of shootings, but the trauma lingers for a lifetime.
And I think we might also broaden the definition of who is a survivor. I mean, hearing her talk about how all those kids in that school in Uvalde are going to have PTSD for life. I think about our coverage of the Aurora Theater shooting, and 10 years on, we can name all the people who lost their lives. We could probably name a few other people who were injured and who have survived, who we kept in touch with over the years. I personally couldn't name somebody who was in that theater but was not physically injured that day, but they are survivors.
Absolutely. And talking about the ripple effects, this impacts countless lives, not only those who are memorialized, for example, at memorials like the Columbine shooting.
Noel, thank you. Tonight, a sign that one of the handful of schools in Colorado where they have decided to arm teachers, they want outsiders to know it. Hanover Junior Senior High School in Colorado Springs has this sign prominently displayed out front. Attention, please be aware, in all red letters, staff may be armed and will use whatever force is necessary to protect our students. In 2016, Hanover School District 28 became one of the first districts in the state to allow trained teachers and staff to conceal carry at school. A next viewer stitched together my words on the day of the Uvalde shooting and shared this photograph with us. We discussed why the United States has a far higher rate of mass shootings than other countries with similar mental health challenges and video games and so forth. Julian Golden stitched together the question and the answer. Why does this keep happening? It's the guns. High winds have paused the search for a missing boater down on Lake Pueblo until at least late tonight. The man was on a boat that was carrying 13 people when it capsized last night, sent everybody into that 60-degree water. Parks and Wildlife has been on this program and others warning, even if you are a very good swimmer, going into water that's colder than 70 degrees, your body will start shutting down. Rangers were called out to Lake Pueblo Reservoir just west of the city around 7:30 last night. 8 kids and 3 adults were rescued and taken to a hospital to be treated for hypothermia. 1 woman died, and they've not been able to locate the body of another man who was on the boat. They're using sonar to search for him. The boat capsized in water that's 80 to 90 feet deep. The wind is making it difficult to get an accurate reading on the sonar. The thought is it will be quieter overnight, so they're going to try and resume at 10 p.m. Colorado Parks and Wildlife says going into water that cold without a life jacket is real trouble. And most of the large bodies of water in Colorado aren't going to hit 70 degrees at any time in the summer. Those that do hit 70, that'll be like July or August. Early in the season, a lot of lakes and reservoirs are still getting snow melt. And if you wind up in water that cold without a life vest on, there's not a lot of time.
Once you get to the surface, you have, honestly, seconds, if not just minutes, to get oriented. You start losing dexterity very quickly. So the use of your fingertips and fingers, we oftentimes do hear about, potential leg cramp. I've experienced that hitting cold water, cramp in your arm, and again, trying to stay above, keeping your head above water in waves as well.
Grant Brown, who you heard from there, CPW's boating safety manager, says somebody's swimming ability really does not come into play in water that cold unless they're really close to shore.
Oftentimes this stuff happens, you could be a ways away. We've had people drown just feet from shore. You go to stand up. I mean, if you can't touch the bottom, you can drown. We've had folks that I think we had recovered an individual that was about 5'7", drowned in like 6 feet of water. So you might go to take that last swim and try to stand. And if it's above your head, that could be all it would take.
Now, this doesn't mean that swimming's off limits in Colorado's lakes and reservoirs, and even here in the early season, but they'll typically have specific safe swimming areas near shore that are segmented off by buoys. In the case of boaters or people on paddle boards or kayaks, people not expecting to go into the water, that's where it gets real crucial to have that life jacket on. Even with the risk of hypothermia once you're in the water, if you've got that life jacket on, greatly increasing your chance of survival.
Tonight's next question comes to us from Alicia in Littleton, wanting to know why rain and snow totals for the city of Denver are officially measured all the way out the airport, because of course the weather's often different downtown.
Alicia, we've had this question before, but I don't know that we've ever gotten into this detailed of an answer about why. So Denver's official weather station is at the airport for a couple of reasons. So DIA is already required by the feds to take regular weather measurements. The National Weather Service uses that data and shares in the cost of gathering it. For rain and snow, a person has to physically go out to the station and measure it twice a day. And the airport is always going to have somebody on hand, 24/7, 365, to take those measures. So that's why a lot of cities have their measurement stations at their airports. In the case of Denver, you could have a National Weather Service, but ours is in Boulder. It's not downtown. The location of a city's official weather station is designed to be in a place that will remain unchanged for potentially hundreds of years. Most cities don't move their airports about. That was just kind of us. The new weather station records at DIA that started in 1995 are expected to be kept there as long as there is an airport in existence on the site. Send us the questions you have, big or small. If you would, record them on audio or video and email to next@9news.com. Because if you're wondering, somebody else is too. This Memorial Day, we remember all those who gave their lives for our country. And there are families in Colorado marked by that loss. There's also a nonprofit that is standing by their side. Your latest Word of Thanks microgiving campaign is supporting Angels of America's Fallen, a nonprofit based out of Colorado Springs that works with those families across our state. They honor fallen military and first responders by supporting the dreams of their children. It's a really wonderful concept. Whatever each child in those families chooses to pursue, whether it's a sport or music or the arts, Angels comes in and promises that they will cover the bill for that pursuit every year until the child turns 18. The nonprofit also pairs those kids with mentors who encourage them and specifically watch out for their mental health. Since last week, you've raised more than $20,000 to help Angels support families in Colorado who are already in their system, and also to bring in some new families in our state who have been on a waiting list. Each time they come in, it's with that promise, years long, to support their children's pursuits through the end of high school. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491, and I'll send you the link to join me in donating to this nonprofit. As we remember those lost while serving, we remember, too, that their families could still use our help. Our support for the nonprofit Angels of America's Fallen will help them create more long-term bonds with more Colorado families that know the cost of service.
As Americans take the day to honor those who made the greatest sacrifice for our country, a family from Colorado still waits to bring home an uncle killed behind enemy lines in World War II.
People do sacrifice way more than non-military families know, and it doesn't stop, sadly, like at that one generation.
Rams and dams are the most Colorado thing we saw today as we learned a little bit about Bighorn bachelorhood. And we celebrate Colorado's latest hope for a pro sports title. Not them. Right building, though. That's next.
Some families in southern Colorado have spent the whole holiday weekend waiting for word that their homes are still standing. A wildfire in Conejo County started on Saturday and forced evacuations. Folks who have not been able to go home since. They'll get a chance to go back into that area tomorrow morning. The Mencaven Fire has burned almost 200 acres. It's about 15 miles north of the Colorado-New Mexico border. If there's good news here, it's that the fire has not grown in size since its initial size estimate. The Conejo County Sheriff says one lane of Highway 17 is going to open at tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, for people who live and work in the area. Anyone going in and out will need to be escorted by law enforcement. The most Colorado thing we saw today is rams and dams. Jill was in Waterton Canyon last week when she spotted this herd of bighorn sheep passing the Strontia Springs Dam. So, fun fact, this is like a bachelor outing for the rams, but that's kind of their life. They live in these little bachelor groups, and then the ewes live in herds with the younger lambs, so the rams and the ewes typically only meet up to do their business. If you see something that just says Colorado to you, send it our way. Snap a photo or take some video and email it to next@9news.com, or you can always give us a shout on Twitter with the hashtag HeyNext. A Colorado pro sports team finally has the opportunity to play for a title. Not talking the Avs here, although they're closer to the Stanley Cup right now than they've been in 20 years. They get set to start the Western Conference Finals series against Edmonton. No, we are talking about your Colorado Mammoth. It's lacrosse. 2 wins away from their second NLL title.
It's a best-of-3 championship series against the Buffalo Bandits. The National Lacrosse League title on the line. Buffalo was the best team in the league this year, and it's a rematch of the 2006 title series where the Mammoth won their one and only title. First game is Saturday in Buffalo. Second game is at Ball Arena, Saturday, June 11th at 7 p.m. We're telling you this now because the Avs play on the road in the Western Conference Final that same night, meaning coverage of the Mammoth will be largely extinct.
A break from the storms this Memorial Day with sunshine, bright blue skies, and temperatures a little bit cooler. 66 in Denver, yet 82 in Lamar. Storm system is spinning to the north and east of us, bringing the threat of large hail and tornadoes to the northern plains. Behind it, enough cold air coming in. There are a few residual snow showers. Isolated storms on the plains tonight. Denver stays dry until tomorrow afternoon. We start off sunny. We go mostly cloudy midday and then showers turning heavy tomorrow night into Wednesday morning. Once the showers move out on Wednesday, we clear out, but our high only 59. Sunshine and 70s Thursday, then back to the 80s for the end of next week and next weekend.
There are still tens of thousands of American military members unaccounted for from World War II. That still takes a toll on families.
And that my grandmother, great-grandmother, and great-grandfather died not knowing where their son was.
The story of one Coloradan's quest to find her great uncle. Next.
The World War II Battle of Anzio began to break the Nazis' hold on occupied Italy, and that happened at an incredible cost to the Allies. Robert Francis Corcoran was among the Americans lost. His plane was hit by enemy gunfire and his parachute took him down behind enemy lines. He did not survive. Generations later, his grandniece in Colorado is still working to bring him home. She shared her family's story with our photojournalist Byron Reed.
This is a letter that my dad wrote to the immediate Corcoran family, and it says, Robert Francis Corcoran, my uncle, was the youngest of 3 brothers. My name is Nina Corcoran Newcomb, and I am the great niece of Robert Francis Corcoran, KIA-MIA from World War II. This picture is in the old Lowry Air Force Base. Great Uncle Robert was in the Battle of Anzio in Italy, and it was intense. And so he was a gunner. The plane he was in was badly damaged by German fire. And so the pilot told them to parachute out. And we know this because the pilot survived and went to my great-grandparents' house to let them know what happened. The other gunner landed in friendly territory. And very sadly, my great-uncle Robert flew into or was blown into enemy territory and was killed by the Germans. And we know that because a German officer went above and beyond, and he drew a map of where he buried my great-uncle Robert, and he didn't have to do that. And because of that map, we have hope to find him. From World War II, there's 82,000 plus missing in action. And my great-grandmother, like, she had 3 boys at war, and her youngest died. And sorry, but it's just so hard to think of that. When I learned of Uncle Bobby's death, I was in the 4th grade, and we found a bunch of organizations that are actually looking for missing in action people that we did not know about. The main one is called DPAA. DPAA stands for Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. And they went this January. They had contacted the landowner, and they were supposed to arrange a meeting where she was going to let them on the land. And sadly, who knows why, this is my big mystery and my big challenge right now, she changed her mind. God bless you, Uncle Bobby. May we be together one day in God's heaven. While we're in Memorial Day, I just want to say thank you. The fact that our nation invests in the pain that we still feel generations later. I just want everybody to remember that on Memorial Day, if you just take a pause and think of people like Uncle Robert, that would be great.
Newcomb says after 78 years, they're still working to get the necessary permission to search that particular area near where the Battle of Anzio took place. One of you offered a strong piece of feedback tonight, tying Memorial Day to mass shootings. I'll explain why I respectfully disagree next. Feedback tonight. Amy writes in, her husband was a paramedic who responded to the Aurora Theater shooting. She wrote, I will never forget the look in his eyes when I saw him. It was a look of pure stress and trauma. She continues, no one ever thinks about the first responders, dispatchers, the general public. Thank you for remembering us today. And Kathy writes in, her daughter was a student at Deer Creek Elementary, or Deer Creek Middle School, where there's a shooting in 2010. And she said that they definitely still suffer from PTSD, but they're not remembered by journalists and others. Paul in Denver wrote in to say, on Memorial Day, we must do more than honor the members of the armed forces who have fought and died for the United States. Paul says we must remember the millions of people who have died from bullets fired in mass shootings, homicides, suicides. Paul, I respectfully disagree with that. I think that those who have died in the line of service are lost, we hope, defending American freedom and American values. Those who die in our country by gun violence, they're lost in a failure of American values, or at least what we say are our values. Perhaps we should dedicate a different day to their remembrance.